Welcome back to Three Legacies Recovery Recording Podcast, where we explore the ongoing journey of recovery and the spiritual growth that comes with it. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.
Hey everyone, it's Paul from Three Legacies Recovery Recording Podcast with a quick note before we get started with this episode. It's hard to believe we've been doing this for an entire year now. It's been such an amazing experience getting to know everybody. We already have the majority of 2026 booked up and we have a lot of great guests scheduled. We don't make any money off YouTube or any of the other platforms. This podcast is completely self-supporting and we've spent a lot of money, time, and energy into it simply just because we love doing it. We're not trying to make a profit, but we are trying to cover our upcoming expenses if that's at all possible. If you'd like to be a part of that, you can make a contribution at our Venmo, which is Recovery Recordings 615. We'd like to keep this commercial free. Thank you. Hello everyone, welcome back to Three Legacies Recovery Recording Podcast. I'm your host Paul. Today is Sunday, January 11th, 2026. This is episode 96. We appreciate all the support from the listeners. You can email us at recoveryrecordings615@yahoo.com. You can also find us. We have a private Facebook page where we post stuff, but it's private. So feel free to get on there and send us a request. We'd love to add you to the page. We try to put upcoming events on there. Speaking of upcoming events, we have Bill C. from Torrance, California. That's going to be on the show next Sunday, January 18th. And we're calling that episode Spiritual Condition. Do you have one? ? I love that. Then for the rest of the month, so a lot of people don't realize that we have this is a YouTube channel. We post a lot of recovery talks on here as well, and there's over 600 different AA, Al-Anon, Cocaine Anonymous, etc. talks. And last year we had our first annual Rule 62 men's retreat in Swanee, Tennessee, up on Mont Eagle Mountain, where we had Scott L., John E., and Barkley R. And this next weekend we'll have. We're going to do our second one, which is Joe C. from Palm Coast, Florida, and Tom M. from Waynesville, North Carolina. So stay tuned, and I'll have probably 10. I'm guessing I'm going to record the whole weekend, so it'll be exciting. The guys are going to go through, just share their personal experience through just in recovery. Super excited about that. My prayer today is that something spoken here touches someone's heart, draws them closer to the Spirit, helps them receive strength needed to keep moving forward towards healing, hope, and renewal. And tonight, joining us all the way from Eugene, Oregon, we have Gene C. How's it going, Gene?
Good.
Good. Thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, I got, and also Jane W. from Nashville. How's it going, Jane?
Hey, Paul. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm going good. I'm good. For the listeners, Jane had been on the show. We've done 2 episodes, probably 3 or 4 months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so go back and listen to some of those. I'll get the dates before we get off here, and we got probably 5 episodes coming up, 4 or 5 episodes coming up over the next few months that we're super excited about.
Yeah, I think there's this one and then 3 more.
Yeah, nice. How's things going for you, Jane?
Things are A-okay. I slept a lot last night, so I was a little worried about staying up past my bedtime, which honestly is kind of 8 o'clock, which is what it is now. But I slept enough last night that I'm doing okay.
Nice, yeah. And Gene, how's it going? How's life in
pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm, a lot slower than I used to be, but that's actually okay. It's there's a whole other aesthetic to that.
Nice.
These days.
Nice. How what's your sobriety date, Gene? I was curious that earlier.
I'm 35 years sober.
Nice.
Just past 35 on January 2nd.
January 2nd. Nice. Wow. Okay. And Jane, what about yours?
Mine is January 1st, and this will be relevant in this conversation. January 1st, 2007. So I just turned 19
Wow.
in the last couple weeks.
Yeah, cool. So for the listeners, we're calling this episode "Attraction Rather Than Promotion," and me and Jane had talked off and on about like what we're trying to ponder ideas that we had, and this is a topic that's dear to her heart that she expressed to me, and Gene is a big part of this, and I'm just gonna let y'all go ahead and take over, Jane.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, so attraction rather than promotion is important to me in a bunch of ways. Of course, that comes from a tradition, and we've already established that Paul is in my phone as Paul Traditions, and I am in Paul's phone as Jane Traditions.
Nice.
We are both traditions nerds. So I care about that from like an AA traditions perspective, but I also, the first way that it became important to me was in how a person coming into Alcoholics Anonymous or considering getting sober, how that person sees what's happening in the rooms and whether it's attractive or whether it feels to them like it is being promoted to them. And I, at least, am the sort of contrary person who's not interested in having it promoted to me. Jean, when I first came in, was a really important part of me feeling attracted to AA. And when I asked Jean if she wanted to join us and if she wanted to talk on this topic, she said yes. So I want to start by asking Jean, what does that mean to you?
That's the whole basis of how I came in to AA. I didn't know anything about AA. It seems odd at the time, but of course, I mean, why would I hang around with people who didn't drink, right? So I knew nothing about AA. I'm not sure I'd ever even heard of it. But a good friend of mine had gotten a DUI and she'd lost her license, and would I drive her to this stupid meeting? So I said, sure, I'm a good friend. I'll drive you to the stupid meeting. But it was, cold and wet and awful. And I was going to sit in the car with my book. That's what I do. But it was cold and wet and awful. So I went into the room and sat in the back, in the dark spot. And I said, I'll just sit back here with my book, right? This is, by the way, the only time in my life I've ever been the designated driver. I was not a good candidate for that. So I sat in the back of the room and tried to focus on my book, but my attention kept getting pulled by what people were saying. And I was fascinated by it. And finally, I put the book away and just listened, not because I thought I was an alcoholic, but because I was sitting there listening to people trying to tell the truth about themselves when it wasn't complimentary. And you don't hear that very often.
Nice.
Can't think of another place where you hear that very much. So that was the first thing that was attracted me. I thought this was bizarre. This was weird. And then when people would talk about their drinking, it made me frightened because I thought, quiet, shh, you're not supposed to say that. Don't say that. Don't tell people how much you drink, for God's sakes. That's a secret. It was always a secret in my family, at any rate. So I didn't believe that I was an alcoholic, but I really liked the meeting. And then I drove my friend home, and it was a 5-day-a-week noon meeting. So I arranged to pick her up the next day and the next day and the next day. And then on Friday, I called her and said, okay, you ready to go to the meeting? She said, well, I'm not going today. And there was that moment. And that made all the difference, because I thought, well, if I go to the meeting, I have to go. I'm not like going for her.
Yeah.
So but I slammed the phone down and ran out the door because I wanted to go to the meeting. And if I'd let my brain get hold of that for very long about why I was going by myself, I might not have gotten there. But I liked the meeting and I wanted to go there. And I wanted to know if George had gotten the job, and all those things where we start to care about the people and what's going on in their lives fairly quickly. I mean, I did within 4 days, right? I wasn't, I was taking a break, right? I wasn't quitting drinking. I was just taking a break because it had been kind of a rough Christmas, and I was just taking a break. So I was already not drinking, and I thought, well, this is a good thing to do. I'll just go here, and I didn't say a word for a long time. And, people said things like, if you want what we have. And I thought, well, what have we got? And I'm looking, what are they talking about? I didn't understand these phrases and this stuff, but still I was very attracted to the sense of camaraderie in the room, to the support that I could feel that everybody had for each other, to the welcoming, to how welcoming it was, to the fact that nobody proselytized me. That, like Jane said, that was extremely important. Nobody came over to me and said, here, you need to read this book and blah, blah, blah. If that had happened, I think I would have bailed and not come back.
Yeah.
So I am always extremely careful with newcomers to never do anything even remotely like that, because I knew how quickly I could have been scared off. It took me probably a year to believe I was an alcoholic, and I had to listen to other people for that long to actually believe I was an alcoholic. I didn't drink the whole year. Very strange. I was a daily drinker. I wasn't one of these binge. I don't understand you binge people. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I was a daily drinker. I needed to drink to get through the day and to, have a reason to go to work. And, so that's the reason I went to work, so I could buy booze, right? I mean, that's what you do. You need some money for that, So I just got through that first year because I was attracted to the meeting. That's the reason I stayed there. And that's the reason I kept coming back. And for a long time, I didn't know there were other meetings. So somebody had to tell me, oh, there are other meetings. You could go somewhere else. And I was like, oh, really? Are there meetings? So I got a meeting list and I started going other places. And I felt the same kind of thing at the other meetings as well. So I think one of the other really important things for me was the first meeting I stumbled into. It was a mixed meeting and there was a huge range of people there and a lot of tough folks. I'm an old English teacher. I'm not one of the tougher folks, but we could all kind of sit there and hang out together. And I found that remarkable and really interesting.
Nice.
Love that.
Yeah, I love that too. And Jane, talk to us. Tell us a little bit about your experience.
Well, I have, so many thoughts. One of the things that I just don't want to forget to say, although it's kind of jumping ahead chronologically, is that, Gene, you're really one of the people who primarily taught me that it is okay not to proselytize in AA. I know we use that tradition, right? We say it's about attraction rather than promotion. But I and probably some other people in AA can also really get into a pretty rigid headspace where I believe, okay, well, if this person has alcoholism and they don't do what I did, right? It's this lack of humility in the beginning. I think the longer I'm here, the less I think I actually know the answer for other people. But there's a whole period early on in sobriety, for me at least, where I was like, oh, this worked for me. It will work for everybody who reminds me of myself in any way. And if I don't get them to understand it, that's an emergency and they might die and then it'll be my fault. And I think a lot of us do think like that for some periods of time. And so I could get into this really anxious place where I felt like if I don't kind of corner that newcomer and make sure they have phone numbers and make sure then I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do in AA. And I'm so grateful that really from early on, I was lucky enough to be around people who showed me that, for one thing, there are many ways to carry the message in AA. And for another thing, it's really okay, and sometimes even the best possible thing, to just remember somebody's name. Like have that be all the 12-step work I do from one meeting to the next, is just remember somebody's name, maybe offer them a cigarette if I have one. But that's it, and that's not doing it well enough or not doing it hard enough or not doing it perfect enough, that may actually be more attractive to a lot of people.
I love that. I'll tell you something that I love that. For me, when I first come into the rooms, it was one of those, like I was raised, quote unquote, like, oh, you don't call them, they need to call you, et cetera, et cetera. But to be honest with you, like the longer I've stayed sober, like I call them, right? I get their number. I realize today how important it is. I'll even put like in my calendar, you'll see little things, but it might say like call so and so. Like because I realize like I have such a busy life sometimes, and I heard so and so that's a new guy in a meeting or whoever. That'll be going through a situation, and he'll mention like I have a court date on this date or a doctor's appointment on this date. So I'll get on my phone right then and put on there like on my calendar, call so and so and ask him how everything's going, right? And for me, I needed to establish for the guy, like I want him to know that I'm interested in his life. It's vital for me. Like my relationship with him is important, right? But I wasn't necessarily raised like that in AA, right? But yeah. So I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the actual, kind of the story of why I thought of Gene when I was thinking of attraction rather than promotion. And Gene, I'm about to get kind of cheesy, so plug your ears if you don't want to hear it. But so I got sober January 1st, and I went to a meeting on the evening of January 1st. I called our local AA phone line, which since it was January 1st, which is a holiday, there was nobody in the office. And so people had it forwarded to their own cell phones. So somebody answered the phone and on that morning and was just carrying around her cell phone. And I'm still in touch with her today, by the way. She's obviously also a big part of my story. But so she and another woman came to my house that first night and they brought me to a meeting. So my first meeting ever, evening of January 1st. The morning of January 2nd, the other woman who had come to my house brought me to her home group. And then at noon on January 2nd, I went to my third meeting ever. And that's where, on January 2nd, in this meeting, Gene was celebrating an AA birthday.
Nice.
And so what happened at that meeting for me, and I'd love to hear Gene's side of the story because she remembers it a little bit differently than I do. But one of the things I remember is there were these people in the room who obviously had long-term sobriety. Gene was celebrating 16 years on that day. And this was the sort of meeting too, where they don't ask you who's in their first 30 days. They ask you if this is your first, second, or third AA meeting, because this is a meeting where people cycle in and out all the time in early sobriety. I assume that's the reason anyway. It was right next to the bus station, just a lot of sort of, folks who are in and out of early sobriety. Yeah. But it was my third meeting. So I raised my hand. And at some point in her share, my recollection is that Gene looked across the table at me and said, "This is the one place in the world where we know that 30 days is longer than 16 years." Mm-hmm. Wow. That made a huge impression on me, obviously. There's the ego piece. It's like, somebody knows how hard it is right now. But there was also just that like generosity of spirit to me too, to say like, hey, what I'm doing is available to you. And I'm familiar with how hard it is because I was also in my first 30 days at one point. Yeah. Anyway, I remember all these people who were laughing, who seemed to be okay in their skin, who were funny. Gene was funny. And there was also pretty clearly no bullshit about Gene immediately. And she just kind of had a vibe that I wanted to be at some point in my life. I wanted to be a person who was this clear, this cogent, this, she was laughing at herself and also being generous. And all of that to me was so attractive. Like I immediately knew that's what I want to be someday or be to somebody else someday. Wow. And then the other thing that happened in that meeting is that at the end of it, we've talked before about how there are some outside issues that are kind of my nuclear button. And if you want me really to kind of come unglued, you can make certain kinds of jokes, maybe sometimes especially sexist ones at that time in my life. And at the end of the meeting, during the meeting, anyway, a guy I'd never seen before made a joke about Gene that really insulted all women except Gene. And I immediately felt just like enraged and terrified. And what do I do? And everybody else in the room laughed, like at him. But not in a mean way, but in a way that says to me, we're not scared of this. And we love this guy, but we also kind of think he's full of shit, but all of that is okay here. It was an approach. It was a way of responding to something that I thought was intolerable and could have driven me out of AA, honestly, because I was very brittle. And instead, this group of people just kind of laughed and loved him anyway, but it was obviously that they weren't really that into that joke. And I'd never seen that kind of a response before. I was so fragile. So there was so much in that first meeting that I wanted.
Wow. I love that. That's huge. Gene, talk to us. What was your experience? What can you remember of that day?
I'm delighted that Jane told that story, because I did not remember that part at all but now that she told the story, I remember, and I even remember the joke. I remember who it was.
Uh-huh.
And I remember thinking, you jerk. We laughed. I mean, we laughed,
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Because you don't help somebody get sober by belittling them.
Yeah.
No matter what's going on.
Nice.
So, but what I remember about that day is that you were really angry.
Wow.
You were pissed off, man. We were all having so much fun, and you were miserable.
I
And it
was.
was obvious to me, and that's one of the reasons why I said the thing about 30 days,
Ugh.
because I was like, I could see that you were just radiating misery.
Yeah.
And we were all it was all whoop-de-doo. We were having a great time, and we had the cake, and we did everything, and we were telling funny stories, and there you were, just radiating misery. So
Yeah.
I hoped very much that the fun would bring you back, because it brought me back. That was one of the things that surprised the heck out of me in AA, is how funny we are. Oh my God. The humor is fantastic.
Yeah.
And without the humor, I don't know that I could have hung in there, because I like to be funny, and I like funny stuff, and I like jokes, and I like cartoons. Jane will tell you that I fill up, the email with cartoons all the time. But that was a great day for me. I was having a wonderful time. But we all need to remember what it was like in those first 30 days, and how hard it is, and how emotionally disconnected you feel. And how people having a good time, you might not be able to stay in the room with people having a good time. So good for you for staying in the room, because I don't know, some days when I feel down, I don't want to be around anybody who's laughing and having a birthday, for heaven's sake.
Yeah.
But we used to love birthday parties, and we still love birthday parties. And I just had one. Jane just had one. I had all kinds of people come to my house and bring me things. It was amazing. So.
And just very related, like it's one of the many things you've taught me, but you also told me once that January is your birthday month and you celebrate the whole month. And I was like, cool, I'm gonna celebrate the whole month. It's also my birthday month. There's so many ways in which, to increase it past the first, just like, do I want to come back to an AA meeting? Also, for me, the questions of like, who do I want to be my sponsor? Who do I want to call when I have a question? Who do I want to have as a part of my community? There is a really small and fear-based part of me, and I think of a lot of people, that can be really attracted to people who, I think you've used the phrase Dr. Glumlot before, and I don't know if that was about this type of person or something else, but like people who seem to be extremely sure of themselves. They have a lot of clarity about how everybody should do things. There's a right way to do it, and they're not interested in interrogating that. And they, speak well, communicate well, have charisma, whatever. Like there's something about them that makes them appealing. But what I really want from them in a way is certainty, because that makes me feel like I'll be safe. And so I can be attracted to people who are doing their life in that way. And so it is also carrying the message of Alcoholics Anonymous and recovery. And to me, honestly, carrying a better message. Obviously, your mileage may vary, to be less rigid and less interested in telling other people what to do, but just to be having a really happy life. Like that line from the Big Book that says, we think cheerfulness and laughter make for usefulness.
Yeah.
That's something I really got from you, is that it is not just like, taking a break from the obligations of sobriety to be cheerful and have laughter. It is, I'm not going to say it's an obligation to be happy all the time. Don't tell lies, take care of yourself, but to be too busy to have a crisis, or to enter somebody else's crisis, or to be having so much fun that you can't really be brought down, or there's so many, anyway, those are ways to show other people that life can be good, instead of telling them, to just show them. And then those become the type of people I want to ask for advice.
Yeah, that's good. Good. Gene.
I was just thinking about in one of Bill Wilson's writings, it's not in the big book, I don't think. It might be a pamphlet or something. He says, if you want what we have, we'll turn cartwheels to give it to you.
Nice.
But if you don't want what we have, God bless you. We hope you get some help and we'll move on to somebody who does.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I found that very helpful because it's not tight. You know, it's kind of loose and it's loving, but it's also accepting the fact that I can't give you what you don't want.
Yeah.
So I've always tried to remember that. And then, of course, I also wanted to talk about after the pink cloud, what's the attraction? You know, what's the attraction rather than promotion? Because my first, of course, was the pink cloud, and I loved the pink cloud, and it was great. But at a certain point, I tried to disqualify myself. I hear lots of people doing this, but I don't know how long. I've been in going to meetings for a year or so, and finally got a sponsor. And I was in a meeting one day, everybody's talking about their DUIs, you know. Well, I'm a little get drunk on the couch and pass out person. I didn't have any DUIs. And my brain was trying to work on this disqualification thing. So I cornered an old timer after the meeting. Don't ever do this if you don't want to hear the truth. I cornered an old timer after the meeting and said, well, look, I can't be an alcoholic. I've never had a DUI. And she didn't miss a beat. She looked me straight in the eye and she said, how many did you deserve?
Yeah.
And I was absolutely stunned because it made me realize something about myself that I had never really realized before. And that was that my morality was not about what I did. It was about whether I got caught.
Mm.
And that took me to a level of something. Now that was some people might feel that was a bit of a hit, but that was attraction for me because it opened up my sense of myself and my understanding of myself in a way that nothing else ever had in one sentence.
Nice.
And then a little bit later, I don't know how, a month or so later, same meeting, I'm still, chewing away in my head. And people were talking about fear of financial insecurity. And I'm like, well, I don't have any of that, So after the meeting, I cornered another old timer, guy this time. And I said, well, my checkbook's balanced to the penny. I can't be an alcoholic. And he said, so you're a wino with a checkbook.
Yeah.
And I started to laugh and he started to laugh. And I was like, that's right. I'm a wino with a checkbook. That's what I am.
Yeah.
And once again, I was deeply attracted to one sentence, just one sentence. He took me right out of the denial. And I've had some therapy. I don't think I've ever had a one sentence drop of denial in therapy.
Yeah. It makes me think of when I first came in. This time when I came in, I remember having a conversation with my first sponsor about, oh yeah, man, I'd been in AA before. I had like 5 or 6 months, 5-6 years ago, and I know what I need to be doing, yada yada yada. And he was like, but how'd that work out for you? It's like, I smashed that right then. It's like, oh, you're right. I'm in a freaking recovery house right now, asking for help. I need to know that, and that was the cool part about my sponsor was. He used to tell me, he said, Paul, unconditional love, I'm going to tell you the truth even if you're pissed off at me when this conversation gets finished. I'm going to just tell you the truth, Go ahead, Jane.
Well, I was laughing while you were talking, Gene, because I believe you're aware that this is also a gift you have. Just in the last 3 minutes since you were talking about the one sentence, I've written down 3 that you have said to me personally.
Would you share?
Yeah. So there's one that hurt my feelings. But from a person I love and respect and with love. And so in that situation, it was really helpful. I was explaining to Gene, I got sober when I was 22, and I was telling Gene when I was 22 or 23, that I didn't really like going to young people's meetings. And I was sort of trying to explain why. And I don't remember what I said, but she listened very nicely. And then she said, oh, we're a better audience for you, huh? So that hurt my feelings. But also, yes, in a meeting that was not young people, I stood out more and I felt more special because I was getting sober so young, blah, blah, blah. And in a YPA sort of situation, I was not special. I was not the youngest person often by a lot. So that one hurt my feelings, but was very helpful. And then 2 were really encouraging. I told Gene one time that I was going to go to the like detox place, the local detox place that's like a 3-day situation, like come in, fucked up, get sorted out and leave, sometimes to a higher level of care, sometimes back to the street, whatever. It's not long-term treatment. I was telling her that I was feeling really nervous about going and telling my story there because I was just talking about how, maybe they can't relate to me. I've never had a DUI. I've never been in trouble. I've never done drugs. And she just said, so you got a lame story with no heroin in it. and I actually have thought about that a lot. Like, oh, so you got a lame story with no heroin. Like you can still go tell your story, honey. And then the last one, this one isn't really even AA. This is just good being a friend. I think it was December, so there were poinsettias around, and my mom had a bad mammogram, and I was feeling really nervous about her health. And some people I worked with gave everybody in the office a poinsettia, and I got the only pink one, and pink is the color for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And so I was like so worried that God was telling me my mom had cancer. And Gene just said, it's not an omen, it's a poinsettia. And that's another one I think about genuinely all the time.
Nice.
It's not an omen. It's a poinsettia. There's so many ways that my mind can try and murder me. And one of them is that thinking a poinsettia is an omen.
Yeah. I'll tell you this, what comes to mind is and I think me and you briefly, our conversation the other day, I briefly mentioned this. It's happened, it keeps showing up over the last few months, was I've seen people come out of some of the craziest, out of prison, 10, 15 years prison sentences, right? And they come in and they dropped off in AA, right? And they're in a recovery house, etc. And some of like the cold-blooded people, yet there's something, there's in that relationship between sponsee, there's a element of okay, what do I need to do next? That's not there with anybody else, I was talking to a guy the other day. I remember hearing, I'd heard Clancy share on one of his talks one time. His daughter had gotten sober, right? And, it's Clancy, and he said his daughter, after she had like a year or something sobriety, she was like, Dad, you're never going to guess what me and my sponsor was talking earlier. And she shared this information with him. He was like, honey, I've been telling you that for years, right? And she was like, yeah, but you're Dad,
Yeah.
And I get that, right? It's like, oh, okay. So that's what's showing up in this for me. It makes me think of is like that, how there's like this element of like just surrender when what we're talking about, when that element is of the attraction, when that's there, there's something there. It's like you can collapse just enough to where you're willing to be like, okay, and years prior, it was like that was missing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I like to say about the lame story, I have a really lame story,
Yeah.
But I remember a wonderful woman named Dorothy who got sober with Clancy. And she moved up here to Oregon, and we loved her. We just, oh boy, we'd go hang around with Dorothy a whole lot. I went on a sober cruise with Dorothy.
Oh.
Yeah, it was fun.
Nice.
But Dorothy said back, way back, when she got sober with Clancy and was going to the meeting, and there weren't very many women, the guys used to say, you did, you're not an alcoholic. You had a drink and burned the toast. So they took that and used it, and they called themselves toast burners.
Oh.
And Dorothy told me that, and I was like, I'm a toast burner. I love it. I'm a toast burner.
Nice.
So we started spreading that around here, and we would be toast burners and introduce ourselves as toast burner alcoholics. And because I remember after I'd heard a bunch of really heavy duty stories, one of the other disqualifiers I said was, I just have this lame story. I can't talk in a meeting. And once again, straightforward is like, somebody in this room needs to hear exactly what you're saying, because somebody in this room thinks their story isn't bad enough. They're going to go have a drink. You open your mouth and you tell them the story.
Nice.
And just, because toast burner stories are real alcoholic stories. And the alcoholics in my family, we didn't get DUIs, and we generally paid the bills, but we died on the couch drunk.
Wow.
And that's a real alcoholic story, toast burner or not.
I love that. Yeah.
That's so good. Well, I want to make sure to tell another really big piece of the part. Nope. a really big part or piece of the story of why Gene is really important to me. And that is the way that I came to live with Gene at 6 months sober, which is definitely not what I was expecting. So, this is one where I don't think I have heard Gene's side of the story. Very interested in that. I've heard references to my being angry before, by the way. You shared that on my birthday before. But so I got sober January 1st. So right at the end of June, the last day of my first 6 months of sobriety, I suddenly knew that if I went back to where I was living at the time, I was going to drink. And it was one of those things where I'd been living there for a while. I'd been talking with my sponsor about it. I'd been praying about it. I had been okay and connected with a higher power and all that stuff. And yet somehow that day I was like, this is not, intuition came to me and was like, you can't stay there one more night. So I went back there, I packed a duffel bag, and I went to an event that was happening at that day, that weekend, that was a big recovery event. And I talked with a couple of people there, and one of them let me stay on her couch that night. And that night I went to an AA meeting, and it was one of those red ball ones that they do at some events where they throw a ball around the room, and if you catch it, you have to share. You're supposed to share. There aren't really any rules. But I was ducking and I was trying to avoid it because I really didn't want to talk about what was happening. And I was homeless, not without resources, but I did not have a place to live and I didn't have money to live in a place. And I was staying on somebody's couch, and I ducked the red ball a couple of times, and then it got chucked directly in my lap. And so I shared, and I said what I, had just experienced, that I knew I was going to drink if I go back there. I didn't know where I was going to stay. And then I stayed on somebody's couch that night, and we had a conversation that night, this person and I, where I said, I don't know what I am supposed to do. I don't know where I am supposed to go, but I know where I'm not supposed to go. So I'm just going to, that's all. I'm not going to go there. And then I'm going to see what happens, which is a huge faith thing. It felt like a big third step thing to me. I don't know if I'll be caught, but I know what I have to do or what I have to not do. And so it felt like jumping off a cliff. So then the next day I went back to that event, and they had a raffle. And I didn't have money to get a raffle ticket, but somebody handed me a raffle ticket, and the raffle ticket won, and it won a houseplant in a little pot. And in that moment, I thought, I knew God doesn't give houseplants to people who aren't about to have a house to put them in. And I sat back down, and within like half an hour, Gene had tapped me on the shoulder and had said, I hear you need a place to stay. I have a place. You can come to my place.
Nice.
And I lived there for 1.5 years, and it was an extraordinary experience. And then my memory is that when Jean was showing me the room, she said, I don't know what I've been clearing this out for, but I think it might be for you.
Oh, wow.
What do you remember, Jean?
Yeah, commence to Gene, because I'm sitting here thinking at 16 years sober, having a 6 month sober person move in with you, got to be freaking crazy.
Insane. What were you thinking also?
Okay, one of the first things I remembered about that was, like, fast forward a couple of years from that, Jane and I are both in a meeting. She's doing well. She's moved out. And at the end of the meeting, for some reason, she comes over to me and she says, what were you thinking, letting a newcomer move in your house?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, yeah, it worked out.
Yeah.
Well, of course, I remember some of the fun times, some of the good times. Jane loved my parrot. I had an old parrot, and she made great friends with the parrot, and used to take the parrot off into her room, and they would chat it up for quite a while. And they were talking recovery, of course.
Obviously.
Nice.
But I seem to recall that for the rest of the summer, I said you could stay for free. Mm-hmm. And then when you wanted to stay longer, I said, well, you have to get a job and pay rent.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, this may be the end of this, She got a job and paid rent.
Yep.
And nice. And we used to go visit her at the job every once in a while and give her a hard time. But it was a great time. It was a really good time. And I did inform Jane early on that I was not going to be her sponsor.
Yep.
She had a sponsor. I was her roommate. And we needed to talk about what it meant to be roommates,
Nice.
not sponsors. And then when you're roommates, you're not, I'm not dispensing wisdom from the couch here all the time. But at a certain point, I said, "Oh, okay, you can have 2 questions a day." And we stuck to that pretty much. So 2 recovery questions a day.
Yeah, that's funny.
So, good boundary.
Nice.
I remember that happening. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
And then we had to talk about paper products, of course, which
We
became
did.
still a huge, joke between us. It's like I informed her she had to buy paper products because she was my roommate. I wasn't buying all the toilet paper.
Nice.
So to this day, we still make jokes about paper products.
Nice.
Yeah. My recollection is that pretty early, like within a couple of days, if maybe the first week, but I would feel like it would have been on day 2 or 3. I was just kind of dithering around being like, "Oh my God, I'm here with Jean. I live with Jean. I'm going to ask her all my questions." And so I said something to you like, "I'm just going to have this temptation to ask you all these questions," which is of course what I did back before I had any boundaries or any idea how to just communicate clearly. What I meant to say was, "How would you feel about me asking you some recovery questions?"
Yeah.
But instead, I only had the skills to be like, "Oh my God, I'm just going to be asking you so many questions. Wow, haha."
Yeah.
And Jean just, with incredible skills, just thought about it for a few seconds and then said, "How about this? 2 questions a day." It was incredible. It was so helpful to have some guidance. And really it might not sound like a symptom of alcoholism to people who don't have alcoholism that looks like mine, but I really had never learned to directly ask for what I wanted or to clearly communicate when I wanted or needed help. And so like, if I needed a ride somewhere, I was not going to ask who could give me a ride. I was just going to sort of like helplessly say, "Oh my God, I really need to be in this place at this time. I wonder how it's going to happen." Like in the presence of the people I was hoping would solve my problem for me.
Yeah.
And living with Jean fucking cured me of that. I'll tell you what, because she would just say like, "Oh," and leave.
Nice.
And I'd never encountered anything like that before.
Nice. Yeah. I was sitting here thinking, I was like, it sounds like, you looked up because Jean sounded like she had some pretty good set of principles she was living by at the time. And this whole attraction rather than promotion in some ways can be kind of, detrimental to people. We were just talking not too long ago about how, there's like, for example, you may have like people out there that are like big circuit speakers, right? And the majority of AA look up to that guy or that woman, right? But yet they have like these wonderful personalities, but yet they break every tradition known to man from the podium, So that can also be like a danger as well, And so luckily you had you landed across, having Jean with some principles in her life. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then one more thing about living together. I did learn how to buy toilet paper. Thank you, Jean. But also, and my recollection of how the job thing went is that I don't know whose idea it was for me to get a job. It might have been yours. I did know that at some point I wanted to be able to pay rent. But when I got a job and was able to start paying rent, you gave me a congratulations card that said in it, "Now you don't have to laugh at my jokes anymore." And that was knowledge of the 7th tradition. Congratulations. You are self-supporting.
Wow.
You no longer owe me anything. There are no longer strings attached. And, I think Jean had good enough, clear enough sort of self-knowledge and boundaries to not have strings attached to this thing she was giving me, but that is not the case in all situations. And it's much better for me to practice supporting myself. It's so cool and so interesting to be around people who have knowledge of the traditions and will kind of show you what that actually means day to day.
That's awesome. Yeah. I love that. Jean, what comes to mind? So I'm curious, how long did y'all, was y'all in each other's lives in person?
Year and a half is when we
Year and a
lived
half living together. But
Yeah.
you were still in town. We were going to meetings.
Yeah.
I would see you at meetings a lot.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the whole time I've been sober, really, to greater and lesser degrees.
Yeah. And y'all still stay in contact today for quite a bit.
Yeah.
Nice.
I visited
Nice.
recently.
Wow.
Yeah. It was great to see you.
Very cool. Very cool. Jane, what comes to mind? Either one of y'all, something you want to share? Something you've been thinking?
Well, once again, back to the attraction rather than promotion, I've been thinking about, that first meeting and how important that first meeting is.
Yep.
And one of the things that was incredibly important to me was hearing the serenity prayer. If I had walked into a meeting, this is controversial, but if I had walked into a meeting that used the Lord's Prayer, I would have walked out the door.
Yeah.
For those of us that have experienced religion being used in a very negative fashion, that would have been it for me. I would not have stayed to experience anything else because I would have had all my prejudices out in front.
Yeah.
Now, I'm fine with it now, but then the first meeting, that was attraction rather than promotion for me too. I loved the serenity prayer. And one of the things I loved is that also, nobody tells you what higher power to have.
Amen.
My higher power was a tree, and I told people my higher power was a tree, and they patted me on the head and said, "That's nice, dear. That'll probably change as you stay." It hasn't changed. My higher power is still a tree. Because I would sit in my living room, kind of jonesing a little bit, and I saw this tree out there, and I watched the tree go through the seasons, and I thought, this tree knows how to do it. This tree knows how to be a tree, and I don't know how to be me.
Nice.
So the tree was my higher power, still is. Same tree, still there.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah. I had a guy named Bill S. from Connecticut on the podcast probably 6 months ago. And he's 44 years sober, and he was, and this is probably controversial, but people, it's my belief is what it is. But he's 44 years sober, and he says, "Paul, I don't believe in any kind of supernatural being out there. Like for me, I was like, Phil, what does your actions look like on a day-to-day, what does it look like day to day?" And he was like, "When I was 6 years sober, my sponsors had told me that the actions of an alcoholic that's wanting to get sober is to get on his knees and pray." Right? And I was like, interesting. So I was like, "So do you do that?" And he was like, "Ever since then, I've got on my knees and prayed." And I was like, "Well, what does that look like?" And he kind of went over what the prayer looks like. And he's like, he pretty much prays to the day. It's like he surrenders to whatever happens. He's going to get into the flow of life, yada, yada, yada. And, but it made me think of like the idea of like, my personal experience, God, like whatever you want to call it, God, whatever. When the application of spiritual principles is still an application of principles. Right? It's like imagine if like somebody wants to lose weight, and I say this quite a bit, but like say you want to lose weight. Like you don't even have to believe it's going to work. If you eat at a caloric deficit and you burn more calories than you actually eat, right? You're going to lose weight technically, right? So for me, it's the same kind of concept. It's like, what am I doing? What are my actions on a daily basis? Am I surrendering something bigger than my internal dialogue? Am I showing up, trying to help others? Yada, yada, yada. So I love touching on that. You just reminded me of that. So I wanted to share on that. Yeah. So,
Gene, will you share what you've said about if a doorknob is your higher power? Because that's what that made me think of.
When I first heard that in the rooms, I thought, well, that's ridiculous. I think the other funny thing was I thought, well, that's heresy. And then I was, wait a minute. How can it be heresy if you don't believe, wait a minute. That's too confusing. I was told that the only quote unquote suggestion about a higher power is it not be you. Because I also became really clear on the fact that alcohol had been my higher power. Yeah. Because my higher power is whatever I'm in orbit around. So I was in orbit around alcohol. It was the thing at the center of my life that I needed to survive. I thought it was. And it was a very negative higher power. Higher powers are not, we have really negative higher powers, very destructive higher powers. So I was told to trade up to something that is at least neutral. And if possible, then maybe you can trade up to something that's positive, but at least neutral, something that is not destructive.
Nice.
So I went straight for the tree, and the sense of, because I also felt about the tree that there was a spirit of life that flowed through that tree that also flowed through me. Yeah. So we had that in common. We had that kind of a connection. But the tree knew how to be itself, and I didn't. So I still like that, and the doorknob thing, at a certain point, I was going out the door and I had my hand on the doorknob, and I have a habit of saying the serenity prayer before I go out the door. So I put my hand on the doorknob and I went, oh, ha ha, this is pretty funny. Here's
funny.
the doorknob and you're saying the serenity prayer. And so I was like, okay, the doorknob, why not?
Yeah.
I stop. I don't rush out the door. I breathe in and out. I say the serenity prayer. I center myself with my hand on the doorknob, and out we go.
Yeah. Nice. I love
And
that.
I love that. I love the point about that. A piece of the point about that to me is that if a doorknob is my higher power, then my action might be, like what is your action? If my action is to touch the doorknob, pause, and say the serenity prayer, then that's a perfectly functional higher power because it gets me doing the thing I need to do.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if anybody if I feel like I don't have to feel like I'm praying to it, but if having it as a higher power changes my actions, it may very well be enough.
Yeah.
Well, it changes my focus is what it does.
Amen.
And then I can change my actions.
Amen.
Yeah.
And for me, it goes into like whenever, and I like what Gene had mentioned about, like, for me personally, like the pivotal point that kept me here was the fact that I was able to choose my own conception. Right. And because I was the same way, like, they'd been telling me for years, God this, God that, and I had a book of evidence that proved that all that was freaking BS, and so the exercise we do on the second step today is like, all right, you get to choose your own conceptions of a power greater, right? And so one of my favorite is creative, right? He comes up with clever little ways to get me out of the holes I dig. So this kind of ties into what we're talking about. Like I don't care if he'll use a God of my understanding today, right? It's just me, is big enough to use a doorknob concept to get me closer to wherever I need to be, right? And that's something that's bigger than me, that is, that I'm willing to trust, that something's bigger than me, in spite of what my intellect tells me, right? Because if I'm relying on solely my intellect, mental commentary, we're screwed, right? So, so it's about the daily application of spiritual principles for me, right? So I love that. Yeah.
I want to go back to what I found attractive about my first meeting, because as I have mentioned, meeting Gene was at my third meeting. So there had to be something that got me coming back to 2 and 3, right? And so some of the things I remember from my first meeting, and apologies if I've said this like on this show before, I can't remember what I've said where, but there were a few things I remember. One of them is that it was New Year's Day and nobody else in the room was surprised to be sober. And I was the only one in there with a hangover and also a large number of scratches and bruises and sweating whiskey. I was the only one in that state. But other people in the room were talking about how, like, as an afterthought at the end of their shares, they were saying, oh yeah, and it's New Year's Day, it's nice not to have a hangover. And there was something about that being an afterthought to them that was so attractive. Like the idea that whether you drank last night or not isn't even something you have to think about anymore, to not be orbiting that question, right? Like I had days where I hadn't gotten drunk the night before, or I could say no to a drink, but I was fucking orbiting around that fact or around that question. I could not let it go. So that was really cool. I remember that somebody in the meeting referred to a writer of one of the stories in the big book as a prick. And that felt like the language of the heart to me.
Nice.
I realized that there are meetings, especially in this part of the country where I am now, where people really don't want you to swear. Totally fine. Group conscience. I'll respect it.
Yeah.
I learned to swear in AA. It's very useful.
It's incredibly useful. But what it told me on day one is this isn't a cult. And I realized there are lots of definitions of cults and ways to think about it. And people make the joke about how, like, yeah, it's okay to be brainwashed if your brain needs a good scrubbing, but I really had a fear of turning my will and my life over to something kind of malevolent. And so to hear somebody in a meeting call a founding member of Alcoholics Anonymous a prick, I was like, oh, okay, we don't have idols. We don't make people into gods. We can criticize our founders. That really was reassuring to me. And then the last thing, there were others, but the last thing I really remember is that this meeting closed with the 7th step prayer, which of course I did not know, and it didn't make any sense to me. But after that, they held hands and they said, keep coming back, it works. And that's that's what I heard more than anything else was keep coming back. It works. There are lots of other ways to finish it. It can be, it works if you work it works if you let it works if you work it because you're worth it. Da, da, da. Fine. If people find that comforting, obviously it's fine. I think I am really emotionally attached to just keep coming back. It works because of that first meeting, because the simplicity of that message just told me, okay, AA, just go back to AA.
Yeah.
That's going to be my only plan, is to go back to AA until I have my feet under me again.
Yeah.
Right.
Actions.
Instead of being involved in orbit around alcohol, I was in orbit around getting to the meeting.
Yeah.
And that was trading up.
Yes.
That was having a higher power that was not destructive.
Yeah. I remember they were talking about turning your will and your life over to something. Well, I was turning my will and my life over to something. I just didn't realize it at the time, right? I was picking the phone up, asking for help, showing up at the meetings, asking for help, et cetera, et cetera. And one thing that you touched on, Jane, just now that I just thought about was like, I love when I'm talking to a new guy and they have an issue with God, because it's like, so did Bill, right? If you look at Bill's story, he's like, the idea of a God personal to me pretty much just pissed him off, right? And like I try to stay away from cussing in some settings, but at the same time, I still cuss all the time, right? So, I heard my grand sponsor when I first got sober. He said he was like, he had a guy come into the meeting, and the guy was like, what we called religiously wounded, pissed off at the church, right? And he said that the guy had come in. It was like his second time at the meeting, right? And he was real nervous, and he was sitting there making coffee. And the guy said, I just wanted to tell you I appreciate your share yesterday. And he was like, oh really? He pepped up. He wanted to hear what it was. And the guy said, when you was sharing, you said the word shit, right? And he's like, what? He was like, yeah, I come in and I seen all this God stuff on the wall, and I was like, I don't know, this is for me, right? And he heard someone share, and it was like, wow, okay, these people I can relate to, right? Which also kind of goes into the transparency idea and how important that is for me, even not just with the guys I'm working with, but the sponsors I have over the years, like how that transparency is so vital, because like if I get that tidbit idea that this guy has like too much righteousness, and I don't feel like I can share these deadly secrets that I probably need out, right? Then that's not good for someone like me, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I've had a lot of sponsors over the years. I've like moved a bunch of times, and for whatever reason, and it's really interesting to me to watch, seeing when my relationship with my sponsor means that I need a new one. It's really not about them, but it'll be something like I'm not telling them the truth anymore. Mm-hmm. And really, a lot of the time, if I realize I'm not telling them the truth anymore, it's because I'm scared they're too good. There's something about them or the way they respond to things that, not because it's their fault, but I'm interpreting as better than, and that kind of shuts me down. I end up choosing instead sponsors who will say, I realized while I was washing dishes that I was plotting my spouse's untimely death. And so we needed to do something and, maybe head to marriage counseling, or like people who will say, honestly, sometimes I just want to run somebody over with my car. And I could name a few people right now like that. Sure. That makes me feel safe with that person.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Nice. I'd mentioned earlier that I was going to tell the listeners if you go back, if you want to listen to the last episodes me and Jane did, we did an episode. August 27th, we did an episode on inventory, which was episode 62. That was great. It was we called it Inventory, a business which takes no regular inventory, usually goes broke. And she shared a lot of cool stuff on there, some different ideas of some inventory, old idea inventories, etc. And then also on episode 65, which was September 3rd, 2025, we did another episode called Vital Spiritual Experiences. And then our next episode that's going to be coming up with Jane is going to be, we don't have a topic title yet, but we'll pray over one and see what happens. Is going to be February 8th. So super excited about that. Is there anything else anything comes to mind that y'all want to share before we got time? It's y'all's call.
I just, the higher power concept has been useful in all kinds of ways, not just for any large spiritual connection or anything like that, But somebody said to me one time, probably some Al-Anon person, that a higher power is anything you can't control.
Mm.
So that, the 5 o'clock traffic's a higher power, right? I'm not in charge of the 5 o'clock traffic.
Yeah.
So I have to turn my will and my life over to the fact that all these people in front of me are not moving along.
Yeah.
And when I actually managed to do that, life goes better. I remember I was driving down 7th Street one day, and I drove up behind this car, and it had a bumper sticker on it that said, "Let go and let God." And I went, ah,
yeah.
And I drove straight to the central office, got a bumper sticker, because up until then I had sneered at bumper stickers. But I thought that day that bumper sticker, got me in touch. That bumper sticker was service work. So, and I'm all for service work. No, still to this day, I have all kinds of little service work things I do.
Nice.
If I'm, feeling a little bit restless and antsy, how we get. I just walk a couple of blocks to the food pantry and take some food down there, or do something like that. Anything that gets me out of orbit around my own self-will is going to be a better decision.
Nice. I love that.
And I think the thing I want to share, and again, this might be something I've said before, but I really, really, this is the way that I visualize attraction rather than promotion today is, as a lighthouse. Like, if the person who is attractive to me or the meeting that is attractive to me, it is not coming over to me and explaining to me why I need it. It is in its place, just kind of being bright, being something I can see from a distance, and something that shows me where is safe to go, or that is an okay way to live, that's a way people can be sober. And so people who are okay in their skins, people who are laughing at themselves, people who have friends, people who seem connected, people, I also didn't know what "do you want what we have" meant when I came in, but I sort of knew intuitively that whatever this is, I do want it. But now I can really identify in people characteristics that they have that I also want to have. And I want those things less if they're offered to me in the form of advice, or especially advice I didn't ask for. I don't want that. That will cause me to reject really honestly good advice. If you came up to a meeting and told me without my asking, there are rare situations. So a little gentle bullying from somebody who is generally a lighthouse does work, but most people anyway don't do that well, or don't really have what I want in the first place. And so all of that is just to say, I think a lot more alcoholics than maybe we realize really also need that, like carrying a message with depth and weight, which will interest and hold these alcoholic people, does not necessarily look like telling them a message with depth and weight. It just looks like being sober, whatever that looks like today, and happy if possible. And then letting people come to you if they want to. And I really have found, not only is that often a better way to carry a message, it also makes me way less sick and insane. It keeps me saner than trying to give other people something that they didn't ask for. And that in the end makes me a better sponsor too.
Yeah. I love that. And I love that. Cause you'll hear how people will get into like how it works, and I'm not like, downing any of the, anything the book says, but like, it's not a cookie cutter thing for me, right? It's just not, it's not a cookie cutter. For me, it's like, I work with enough guys. Plus, I've worked with enough guys over the last years. Sometimes a guy needs me to freaking tell him what to do. You know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, it just depends. But like, what I'll try to do is I'll try to stay centered, and even sometimes like someone will come to me for like, just because they're just attracted to it in some ways, and then other times like I feel nudged, like, okay, I'm supposed to go talk to this guy. There's a lot of freedom in that. So I love that. I love how some people try to get all rigid and say, well, don't say that in the book, yada, yada, yada. Well, okay, you don't say it in the book, so
yeah.
I love having the freedom, right?
Yeah.
I will also say, go ahead, Gene.
I was just thinking about some of the combinations, of people, and that I mean, my first sponsee, I was terrified of her.
Sure.
My goodness. She was a, stone cold biker bitch with 2 black eyes. I mean, I was like, oh my God, I'm a little English teacher here. I don't know what to do. But so I thought I'd get rid of her. I told her, I gave her my phone number and I tried to sound tough. And I said, call me every day for 30 days. And I figured that'd be the end of that. Well, she called me every day for 2 years. So, I mean, what are you going to do with somebody who wants it that much, right?
Yeah.
And whenever she tells her story now, she's now 34 years sober.
Nice.
Whenever she tells her story now, she always says she followed me around crying for weeks on end. And I said, I would turn around and there she is crying again, So, but we were the strangest combination of people, And one time on one of her birthdays, she hugged me and she said, I just realized we have absolutely nothing in common. And I said, well, only alcoholism, and that's enough.
That's awesome. That's funny. Wow.
That's so good. Yeah, I tend to be really drawn to people with really strong personalities and really strong opinions, and absolutely certain that their way is the way, as I have said before. So kind of rigidity and hardcoreness. And I thought for a while that I should have a sponsor who was mean and hardcore and said mean shit to me. And I actually ended up with a first sponsor who was so gentle. And mostly all she said to me for a long time was, it's okay. And, she taught me to wiggle my toes and get back in my body,
Nice.
And she took me through the 12 steps and I did not know what was best for me. So I did want to slightly complicate what I said before, which is like, yes, I'm drawn to a lighthouse, but also I was never going to ask Jean if I could live with her. She took some steps in my direction as well for whatever reason. So yes, absolutely. Sometimes there are nudges, and in fact, Jean is the one who said, you're just the waiter. You have no control over what ends up on the plate. And that's really true, right? If I'm connected with a higher power or centered or focused, however I want to say that, I'll find myself saying and doing things that I did not expect to.
Yeah. I love to wiggle your toes and get back in your body. In the beginning, I still use that. I still, especially like get me at the dentist's office. I'm in my toes all the whole time.
Oh yeah, me too.
So. That stuff's huge. Yeah. Good stuff. It's funny because like other people, like my mom, I remember when I first got sober, I had a conversation with my mom. You know how we're trying to like fix everybody. I was trying to fix everybody. And I remember having a conversation with her about getting in the moment. And she was like, Paul, she's not an alcoholic. She was like, that stuff's for druggies, right? Which has, okay, I get it. It works for me. It works for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and then you get that eagerness thing, I like my dear Jane there is trying to sober up people at bus stops who aren't drunk,
Oh shit. Yeah. That I want to tell that story really quickly, if I may. So I was living with Jean, and at some point, maybe one of my 2 questions permitted per day, it revolved around the fact that I kept giving people advice who did not ask me for it. And, Jean suggested that I try limiting myself to helping twice per week. And she didn't actually define this for me, but I interpreted that as helping without being asked. So if somebody actually says, hey, will you help me change my tire? That doesn't count. I went to my home group on Monday morning at 7 fucking o'clock. And by 8 fucking 05, I had already been helpful without being asked more than twice. And I couldn't stop. And there was a woman in the meeting that day who had said she was going to go home and drink. And so what I did was I followed her out the door and I walked with her to the bus station, trying to talk her out of it the whole time. And it was my first experience that wasn't about drinking. This is about a shortcoming or a character defect or a maladjustment. Yeah. I was watching myself do the thing I was not going to do, and I couldn't stop.
Oh, yeah.
And so there was a piece of me that was like, this feels familiar. So I walked her all the way to the bus stop, and then I got on the bus with her to go to her house and prevent her from drinking. And then I got back off the bus before it left the station. And I went home and I told Jean about it. And she said, you know what? You got back off the bus. Chalk that up under spiritual progress.
Nice. Yeah.
And I've never had such a hard time again, not giving people help. And I actually really do think some of that, I think that's honestly become one of the ways that I think about the 6th and 7th step, which isn't really our topic today, but like, is that I had tried to let something go. I had tried to have it removed in step 7 before I was ready to let it go in step 6. I like worked them backwards. And in my experience, then what happens is I keep doing it and I can't stop. And that's a very painful experience that almost forces me through 6.
Oh, yeah.
And once I was really willing to not ever do something that insane again, then I was actually able to let it go.
Yeah, I love that. That's what I was talking about when I said comes up with clever ways to get me out of these holes. It's like, oh man, whenever. But I couldn't see that until I had someone that was, like I needed a sponsor, a guide to point that stuff out. Because for me, I'm just sitting there in my misery, pissed off about it, right? And like, he was somebody I would share the experience with, and he'd put a whole new light on it. It's like, I started getting a little bit of evidence that maybe this thing's, maybe something's is actually, eager to, teach me something and grow, help me grow, right? And just my understanding of God, I still use that stuff today. Yeah, nice. Gene, you have anything else you want to share?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Jane?
Might have run down here.
Nah, I'm good. I've said plenty.
Nice.
I'm really grateful I've had so many powerful people in my life who carry a message with depth and weight.
Yeah, amen.
And make you buy paper products.
Also,
Yeah.
I'm honestly less grateful about that.
That's funny. That's awesome. Thank you all so much. It's been awesome.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
Thanks, Paul.
So for the listeners, again, our next episode with Jane is February 8th, Sunday, February 8th. And then stay tuned for the next week. I'm guessing I'll probably have 8 or 9 different sessions from the Rule 62 men's retreat that we'll be recording here in a couple of weeks. Actually, next week will be, before that, it would be Bill C., which is the 18th. And then the following week is the men's retreat. So for all the listeners, thank you so much. Stay tuned. We got a lot of cool stuff coming up. Thank you, ladies. Hope you all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Hello,
Till next
and
time.
Welcome back to 3 Legacies Recovery Recording Podcast, where we explore the ongoing journey of recovery and the spiritual growth that comes with it. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share with a friend. Please note that the views expressed on this podcast are solely our individual views and do not represent any official stance of any 12-step program. We are not affiliated with any specific recovery organization, and this content should not be considered professional advice for alcoholism or addiction.
Hey everyone, it's Paul from 3 Legacies Recovery Recording Podcast with a quick note before we get started with this episode. It's hard to believe we've been doing this for an entire year now. It's been such an amazing experience getting to know everybody. We already have the majority of 2026 booked up, and we have a lot of great guests scheduled. We don't make any money off YouTube or any of the other platforms. This podcast is completely self-supporting, and we've spent a lot of money, time, and energy into it, simply just because we love doing it. We're not trying to make a profit, but we are trying to cover our upcoming expenses if that's at all possible. If you'd like to be a part of that, you can make a contribution at our Venmo, which is Recovery Recordings 615.